Hello and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to everyone.
This is the Two Mats question and answer session brought to you by the New European. Should we kick straight off?
Let's just go for it.
All right.
Will Keir Starmer encourage Alistair Campbell to take a role in number 10? If not, why not? From John Eustace. What do you reckon, Matt?
Well, good question. I mean, I don't know, and I hesitate to speak on behalf of our other editor-at-large.
Our fellow friend and colleague.
I mean, I think he should. I think there's nobody who's, still to this day, who has got his kind of finger on what people are feeling and how to communicate it than Alistair.
Yeah. I think the great thing about what Starmer, one advantage Starmer will have is he's the first Labour Prime Minister, he will be the first Labour Prime Minister, I think, in the party's history, who will have around him quite a large number of people who've served in office for a fairly long time.
Yeah.
You know, Blair, Brown, Blunkett, Harriet Harman, Alistair Campbell, Peter Mandelson, and he can use them as much or as little as he wants. And I agree with you. I think, my hunch is that I doubt Alistair would go in a formal role, but it's clear he talks to Keir quite a lot already, and that's a big plus.
And he's quite, obviously he's very busy because his
main
job is editor-at-large of the New European.
And
doesn't he do a podcast?
Does he? I thought
I've heard of one.
Possibly.
Maybe.
Possibly,
anyway.
yeah.
But
I think he sometimes appears on the Rory Stewart show.
That's it. That's it. That's it. The rest is Rory.
The rest is Rory.
That's right.
Very popular podcast. We're going to pay. We're going to pay for this.
Also, didn't they kick him out of the Labour Party, Alistair?
Oh, he did, yeah, because he voted Lib Dem or something like that.
Yeah.
But I doubt Starmer will be worried about that.
Yeah.
I suppose the one caveat is that, not specifically at Alistair, but just generally, the flip side of what I just said is that, Starmer has to be clear, and I think he has been clear, that this isn't going to be New Labour 2.0. I don't think it's a problem. I think that he should use the fund of knowledge that the party now has, and I think it'll help him.
Yeah, so there's your answer, John. We don't know, but maybe. Next question, please. From Mark in Norfolk. May I take issue with your somewhat scornful dismissal in a recent podcast of the stability Labour is offering as change if it wins the election? For my money, if Labour proves to be only half decent in returning stability to the country, that will be a seismic change compared to the tsunami of lies, dishonesty, corruption and abject incompetence we've had to endure for the last 14 years. Admittedly, a Labour candidate betting on the Tory winning the seat he himself was standing for doesn't tend to dent my argument a little. But, yeah. Great. Well,
I feel
Mark,
I feel very contrite, and I'm sorry, Mark, if Matt and I have been in any way scornful, which is not nice, although fun. No, look, of course you're right. Look, if you force me to choose between Labour stability and continued Tory chaos, it's a very easy choice to make. I'll go for Labour stability, and Mark's right to say that we need the whole political system, which has been in a state of weather chaos for so long, needs to be becalmed, and Whitehall needs to be becalmed, and I think that will be one of Starmer's first tasks, and I think he'll be good at it. Yeah. However, the only caveat I would offer is that if it's true that, and most of the polls seem to indicate that Starmer is going to win a big majority of the kind that comes along once in a generation, or possibly a century. Some of the polls have him beating Stanley Baldwin's 209 majority in 1924. Yeah. If he does that, then I think just to be an agent of stability is a historic waste.
It's a missed opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's all I'd say. But
and to that end, he is in danger of painting himself into a corner unnecessarily.
Yes.
Because there is some truth to say that this is all about getting rid of the Tories.
Yes.
And anyone would walk into government as leader of the opposition. There's an element of truth to that, but it's not entirely true. People, I do think, have an appetite now for investment in the country after going through 8 years of absolute chaos since the referendum. And investment literally as well, and people will stump up a bit, I think.
There's a sort of mixture of anger and high expectation, which will, I think, Starmer will find he's about to be hit by, the 18-wheel truck of being Prime Minister, and nothing can prepare you for that, I think.
I think his honeymoon period will be a very slight proportion.
I also think that, thinking back to last Wednesday's BBC debate, there was a couple of answers where he was waffling and trying to present himself as an agent of unity.
Yeah.
And I don't think that actually what the nation needs at the moment, first and foremost, is unity. I think it needs leadership. And I think that he's at his best, Starmer, when he's ready to be decisive and ready to risk making enemies.
Yes.
And he's going to have to do things that will piss people off as well as please them.
Yeah, and do you know who I think has channeled that better than most is Wes Streeting.
Yes, exactly.
Who says it as, you can see it. He's fizzing with it. He's fizzing with
physically.
Both excitement and of what he can do, and he's fizzing with anger about the state we're in.
Absolutely.
And I think some of that energy is good.
I mean, so frightened and understandably have we become of anything that smacks of polarization. And I get that fear because it's been horrible in the populist era, that it's easy to forget that actually in the end, politics is dialectical. It is about making choices. And, Starmer likes smooth surfaces, and I understand that. And at the moment, that's not a bad look. But if he is going to lead what he calls a decade of renewal, he's going to have to be willing to pick fights and win them.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, anyway, Mark, thank you for your observation. Very well intended, I know, and well received this end. Next question, please.
One issue when discussing newspaper circulation, I agree that the Mail, Express and Telegraph are more representative of the Tory establishment, but when it comes to impact on voting outcomes, the Sun has a greater circulation than all of those combined.
Yeah, well,
Alan Jones.
Well, it does, but I just don't think anyone cares what the Sun thinks anymore. I think it's.
I agree.
I think it's gone too. I'm not entirely convinced the nation really ever did, to the extent that obviously they.
Well, it was a sort of self-perpetuating myth, wasn't it?
The Sun what won it and all of this stuff, and I don't. Obviously they would say that about themselves, but I'm not sure that's true. The Sun, like any sort of populist organ, is at its best when it's just trying to reflect what people are already thinking. It's articulating what's already in people's gut.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're going to have to sort of start taking more account of in politics generally is been reading a great book by a couple of American academics called Yana Krupnikov and John Barry Ryan called The Other Divide. And the point they make is that the real divide now is between the engaged and the unengaged, or the less engaged.
Yeah.
And the point they make about the less engaged in the American context, but I think this does actually migrate across the Atlantic, is that the less engaged increasingly get their politics through entertainment and through YouTube and not through news media. They're not getting it from the Sun and the Mail or the American equivalents. They're getting it through what they hear on their favourite yoga podcast or their not yoga, but whatever it is, and so actually, one of the points that's been made in this campaign is that Farage has won TikTok, right? And it's easy to mock, but actually the numbers involved are much bigger than any of the tabloid newspapers, and so I think you can never ever stop worrying about what the main newspapers are doing, but it's not the story is now much bigger.
And also, I mean, just to put some empirical data into the conversation, the Sun circulation, they don't report their circulation anymore because the numbers are so paltry compared to what they used to be. But it's reckoned to be around 750,000 copies a day. Okay,
right.
Which is a lot of, 50p or whatever it is changing hands. However, when I got into national newspapers in 1993, it was selling close to 4.5 million copies a day. So that's and the Sun has been more successful than most at holding on to its circulation. So that's the level that's decline.
Pre-broadband.
Yeah.
Pre-iPhone.
Absolutely.
The world is just different now.
That's right. All right, Alan, thank you so much for your question. From Tim Fell. Why is all the river water coverage about the Thames? Just as, if not more important, are the chalk streams flowing into the Solent from Hampshire and Wiltshire, a habitat found nowhere else in the world. Southern Water in Hampshire, where I live, has continued to fill these globally important streams with untreated sewage many times a year, whether there has been rain or not. Farmers also contribute to the problem by allowing nitrates to percolate into the streams. Trout continue to die, yet none of the political parties are proposing to do anything about it. Well, Tim, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm a trout fisherman. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I am. I'm a fly fisherman. And what Tim is saying about chalk streams he's not exaggerating. They are absolutely as precious as he describes.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And they are most beautiful, and they are, as us anglers say, gin clear. When they are in their natural state, but they're not gin clear now. They look more like whiskey.
I mean, I think he makes a very interesting and justified point that, there is that sort of southern bias in media coverage, and it has all been about the Thames. And clearly, as Fergal Sharkey, one of our great heroes on the podcast, has tried to say, it's a national problem. I'm concerned about this because Labour is aware of it and is talking about putting the companies into special measures and blocking bonuses and in extremist pressing charges. But they don't want to nationalise water companies because they don't want to take the debt or their liabilities onto the national debt ledger. Yeah. And in the case of Thames, it's 18 billion quid.
And that would be the biggest insult to the public, because not only have they raped these companies, they have leveraged debt against them.
Yes.
For the government then to wade in and pay off that debt, these people who have raped them would walk away scot-free.
I agree. I mean, I totally sympathise with the sort of halfway house that Jonathan Reynolds, the Shadow Business Secretary, has taken. However, my fear is that this is just going to get worse and worse, and that at some point they're going to have to nationalise at least some of the companies simply for public health. And the damage to the environment that Tim and you mentioned is horrific. I think this is going to be a big issue in the next Parliament, actually, and rightly so.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. It's one we will continue to watch for sure. Yeah.
Why are all the parties so dishonest about protecting the NHS budget and not recognising the huge long-term wellness costs from inevitable cuts on other public services?
From James on Spotify. Well, great question. I think what nobody has really addressed to this day is what to do with the NHS and how do you drag social care into that solution as well, because we talked about mythologizing earlier. One of the great mythologies is that the NHS is a world-class health system and that some people think it's the best in the world, the envy of the world. It bloody well isn't. There are so many other, we've covered it in the New European time and time again, models in Europe, abroad, that are far more effective and have far better outcomes, which after all is the whole purpose. And, this idea that I noticed Keir Starmer in that debate the other night said, that having it free at the point of need was absolutely paramount. But it's not free at the point of need at all. You have to pay for prescriptions, you have to pay for dental work, it's
car parking.
It's not the system we pretend it is in our heads.
No, I think
but you can't say it out loud if you're a politician.
So there's a sort of ring of taboo around the NHS. The famous Nigel Lawson quote about it being the closest thing the English have to a religion, I think, is true. James is right that there's a fundamental dishonesty in this campaign about the NHS and its needs, but also he goes on to talk about the inevitable cuts on other public services. And I think, that the Institute for Fiscal Studies has done some very good work on this, for example, just saying, look, do you guys understand that you're going to have to make some really big cuts in the next Parliament as things stand, unless you borrow lots or raise taxes? And neither, Sunak talks about waste and welfare cuts, and to be honest, Starmer simply talks about growth, which is Liz Truss stuff. I don't think either party has delivered an honest answer to this, and they're not going to deliver an honest answer to it before polling day, alas. But the sooner they get honest, the better. Assuming Labour win, the biggest mistake, to my mind, that the Starmer team has made was when Rachel Reeves ruled out wealth taxes, right? Because we're going to need them at some point, not to speak of council tax rises and so on. And I think that the dishonesty of this campaign has been evading, I'm not saying they should have said we're going to raise wealth taxes or we're going to raise council taxes, but to give the impression that they're definitely not going to is going to lead to all sorts of problems in the next Parliament, because they are going to have to raise taxes, not necessarily income or national insurance or even VAT, except for schools, private schools. But we are entering a different world to the world of bloody Nigel Lawson. This is a different time.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things I hope dearly, and I don't know if this is a vain hope, is that when Starmer takes office, he will acknowledge not just the page has turned, but that we are entering, the 21st century can start.
Yeah, and he needs to, he talks about stability, and we've just addressed that in another question, but something needs to give. He can't say, okay, we're not going to have we're going to stick with the Tories tax plans, fiscal plans. We are, we're not going to do any substantive revenue raises, but we're going to hope for growth as well, but we're not going to increase freedom of movement, which would get the economy motoring again. So something's got to give, and there's no real indication as to where that massive spurt of growth is coming from.
We know from Liz Truss and others that you don't just generate economic growth by assertion. You don't just sort of. This is not Hogwarts. This is government, and I think that alas, Labour has stored up some serious problems for itself on this.
Okay, well, thank you, James. Please continue to send in your questions on Spotify if you're listening there, or email us with any questions and feedback to the2mats@tnepublishing.com. Next question, please. Is there any point in fighting... Right, okay, I've seen this question before, and I think it's important to flag up that Martin is writing from Milan, or Milano, where I think, guessing from Martin's signature on the email, he runs a business there. But anyway, is there any point in fighting to get back into the EU? The UK had so many advantages. Tariff-free entry to nearby major markets, excellence and dominance in financial markets, a strong economy, legal and regulatory system that was and still is excellent. All of that was thrown away by a government that claimed to be business friendly. Well, we can agree with everything there.
Yep.
The problem is that there is no real admission of this abject failure, let alone a proposal to change. Under the circumstances, why don't we leave them to stew? Well, so thank you for the question, Martin. But if them
is us.
I'm not so keen. I'm not so keen.
Not so keen on leaving myself to stew.
If you're watching from Milan, watching me stew, I'm not mad about it.
No, I don't fancy stewing. And I think that both of us sort of have done a reasonable amount to try and keep Britain in the EU, and I don't think I don't fancy stewing of vicariously because of Dominic Cummings and Nigel Farage.
You're right. He's absolutely right.
Everything he says is right.
Nobody of any consequence, and obviously I'm ruling us out of consequence, but nobody of any consequence is saying Brexit is a disaster.
Yeah,
which it is.
Again, it's sort of an analogue to what we were just saying about tax, isn't it? That there's been a kind of vow of silence by Labour during this campaign that at every available opportunity they would say, we're not going back on Brexit, we're going to make Brexit work, which doesn't mean anything. Very, very tentative offers to renegotiate the trading deal in certain sectors, the financial services, chemical products and so on, pharmaceuticals. But there's been nothing that really makes you think there's going to be a change. Now, again, those around Starmer say, wait and see.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to wait and see too long.
No.
Because you mentioned earlier the access to the single market and freedom of movement. I don't see how we get back on the front foot on economic growth without that access. We have on our doorstep the world's biggest single market, and we are not in it.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that it's funny because this really ought to be Starmer's Clause 4 in a funny way, although it's not changing what he really thinks. But at some point, and it would have been better if it was in opposition, I think, but it hasn't been, he has to say, at what point, how long is enough?
Yeah.
When you say, this is really not working. We've said it before on the podcast. It was only a referendum.
Mate, there was a woman on the asked a question in the debate, the leaders' debate, on Wednesday, and she said that I think she was in the food and drink sector, and that 90% of her exports to the EU had stopped since Brexit,
right.
And it was an absolute disaster.
Of course.
And then there was some twat from the Tory party, and I don't know who it was, on the Today programme on Thursday morning, the following morning, saying basically, yeah, but tough. We all knew there'd be some collateral damage, and of course, change is tough on some people, and tough, and but think of all the opportunities. But
I keep hearing about these opportunities.
But where are they? And all I see are a load of people who have suffered massively.
Yeah, it's the Where's Waldo, isn't it? Really, is these Brexit opportunities? Where are they? Write in, into the two Matt.
Honestly.
If you've spotted a Brexit opportunity, we would love to hear about it because so far,
but it is disgusting just how callous these
yes,
the arguments
it's
are.
an absolutely vile
to
thing.
look that woman in the face and say, well, some people are suffering. However,
and I'll see you and raise you, which is that I think, and I've thought this not necessarily of mainstream Tories, but certainly of the Farage and sort of Braverman and Rees-Mogg end of the market, that actually Brexit was set up to be a failure.
Really?
Yes, because populists thrive on failure. That's what they betrayal.
God, that's a good theory.
Betrayal,
Yeah.
you see?
Yeah.
I mean, what Farage is now doing is arguing that he delivered this great liberation, and the technocrats and the deep state and the dance instructors, whoever is the latest conspiracy theory, have buggered it up.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that even a brave person's wonderful contribution to British history can be ruined by those people over there. Yeah. Dominic Cummings admitted that he was never absolutely certain Brexit would work. We know Boris Johnson only thought about it in terms of his own personal advantage because he did two versions of the letter or the piece about whether he should be a Remainer or a Leaver. And Farage bet against on the night. Yeah. So my sort of suspicion is that now we're in it, the populists will use it to their advantage in saying, you see, we were going to do it this way, but they're doing it that way.
Like there's been a great Treaty of Versailles style betrayal.
Exactly 100% the Treaty of Versailles.
I remember a little corporal from the getting.
I know, and I know that people get very angry when you talk about the 1930s and so on, but unfortunately, they are applicable. Yeah. Keir Starmer's got to be very careful not to preside over the Weimar Republic. It's really important, and the sooner that we have some honesty about Brexit, the better.
Terrific. Well, Martin, thank you for your question all the way from wonderful Milan. Have we got time for another question? Yes. Oh, it's a good one. From Swifty07 in Birmingham. Do you think politicians should go to Glastonbury?
Well,
what do you think?
Well,
depends who's playing.
I assume this. I assume this is a oblique reference to
Corbyn,
the artist formerly known as Jeremy Corbyn's appearance in. Was it 2017? It was 2017, wasn't it? It was after he'd done unexpectedly well in Theresa May's snap election.
That's right.
And he went onto the pyramid stage and they all went, oh, Jeremy Corbyn, which I have to say to this day makes my flesh creep, right? But, in answer to Swifty07's question, how did that work out for Corbyn, right? Not so well. 2 years later,
he's holding an umbrella over Owen Jones.
Well, if he's lucky, but before that, he led the Labour Party to its biggest defeat since 1935. So I don't think it did. No, I don't. Some politicians go, like Tom Watson, who's no longer in politics, really, is a big music head and goes a lot. That's fair enough. But the idea, can you imagine? I was looking up what's on tonight. You got Shania Twain, Paloma Faith, or Scissor Writer all on during the day on Sunday, right? Can you imagine if Sunak or Starmer, right, or Farage came on stage, right? It's very hard to get Glastonbury tickets, right? The people I know who are going, they labour long and hard to get hold of these tickets. You have to loads of laptops and everything. The idea that your last day at Glastonbury, when you're a little bit tired, right, perhaps a little bit chemically challenged, good God knows, right, and then on stage you think you're having a bad trip because you suddenly see. That's right. You suddenly see Lee, 30p Lee, walking on stage. I don't think any festival goer deserves to be treated like that.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. It reminds me, bizarrely, apropos nothing, but there's a great clip of the great Rick Mail talking about what was the name of their band in that?
Bad News.
Bad News, yeah.
They went to Monsters of Rock.
Have you ever heard him tell this story about going to Monsters of Rock?
They threw piss all over them.
They all came. The audience all hated Bad News.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And they all came with big bottles of cider, drank the cider, and then half an hour later pissed the result back into the bottle. And threw them. And the minute they said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's bad news," he said the sky turned black with this wave of bottles of urine coming all over them.
It reminds me, if anyone out there who hasn't seen, particularly the first Bad News, I think it's on YouTube. It's a comic strip presents thing. It is one of the funniest 45 minutes I've ever watched.
I might watch it again.
But Aid Edmondson as Vim, the lead singer.
Brilliant. I've been to Glastonbury about 5 times, and
I've
seen 2 bands. Absolutely smashed every time.
Yeah,
couldn't get out of the tent.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much, but I was fortunately, mercifully free of political influence at the time. So.
Swifty07, thank you very much indeed. And we'll be back with you tomorrow.
We'll be back tomorrow with our final,
the last of our
pre-election specials. Yeah. In the company, we hope, of Mr. Tom Baldwin, Keir Starmer's biographer.
That'll be
so.
Great.
There'll be an interesting chat.
Great. So join
us 2 days
then.
before polling day.
And like I said earlier,
have a restful and fun Sunday.
Well, let's plug the New European.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Come on. So get
do your job.
Do your job.
Earn your money.
Subscribe to the New European. You can join for just £1 a week for our digital thing, or £2 a week for the newspaper to be delivered every day. By the way, this week's edition sold like hotcakes with that marvellous illustration by We Fail of that kind of ghastly ball of the Tories.
Fantastic cover.
So well done if you got your hands on a copy of that. And we'll give you a £25 voucher to spend in the New European shop as well, just for signing up.
You can buy sound merch, as they say.
Great merch. Bad news merch.
Top merch.
So go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. You'll be supporting this great podcast and that great newspaper.
So
thanks for
rest
listening.
up today.
Rest up.
Just next week's the revolution.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Viva la revolution.
Viva la revolution.